The Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. Chapter 66. The Heart of Hogwarts. When Hermione returned to the Great Hall, the 4 long house tables and the teacher's table had vanished, and the magical ceiling was grey and sleety like the actual sky outside. November in Scotland was often overcast, but that morning was particularly dreary, with a slanting, icy rain fighting against a stiff wind. The rattling of the sleet against the hall's large windows echoed in the nearly empty space. Few snid-shaped cakes from the night before floated near the ceiling like little baked balloons. McGonagall's throne-like chair remained, as well as her podium, and a dozen still undecorated Christmas trees were placed around the hall. Behind the headmistress's chair was a broad stone wall hung with banners of the 4 houses. Hermione looked thoughtfully at that wall as she walked through the double door. In the centre of the empty hall, Harry and Draco sat opposite each other in 2 teachers' chairs, arguing about the inter-house Quidditch match.
"Oh, come off it, Potter,"
Draco snapped.
"The snitch practically came up and introduced itself to Ginevra." "Always with the ready excuse, Malfoy."
"Boys," Hermione called, "we don't have much time." Ran over to join them, pulling out her wand and conjure 2 more chairs.
"Time for what, Mai?"
Harry asked. "Our guest will be here any minute," she said, trying to straighten her skirt and tie. She'd been running all over the castle and didn't want to even think about her hair.
"What guest?" Draco asked. "What guest could be so important that you stick me alone with Potter for another 30 minutes of dreary—"
"Here we are," Hermione said as the large double doors rumbled open. Harry was standing, a look of shock on his face, and Draco and Hermione turned to see who entered the Great Hall. There, standing perfectly dry with every hair in place, stood Narcissa Malfoy.
"Mother!"
Draco said, recovering quickly. Gave Hermione a sharp glance, then strode over to Narcissa.
"What brings you here in this appalling weather?"
"I thought you might be able to tell me, darling," Narcissa said, unclasping a black velvet cloak that held not a drop of rain. Draco took the cloak, quickly conjured a cast-iron coat rack to hang it on, then escorted her to one of the chairs in the centre of the room. Beneath the cloak, Narcissa wore grey satin robes, and her hair sparkled with diamonds. Hermione wondered if she sat around at home dressed for a ball, or whether she had quickly transformed herself. Either way, it was impressive. Hermione tried to smooth her shirt and wished she could straighten her tights. "Thank you for coming, Lady Malfoy," she said, taking a chair.
"Miss Granger,"
Narcissa said, eyeing Hermione's wild hair, or the Gloriana clip, or both.
"Mr. Potter,"
she said, a shade more warmly.
"Always a pleasure to see you, Lady Malfoy,"
Harry said. Narcissa turned to look at her son, and Harry shot Hermione a questioning look.
"Draco, shouldn't you be in class?" Narcissa asked. "Hermione wouldn't let me go," Draco said with a smile.
Narcissa fixed Hermione with a cold eye.
"Your note was quite vague, Miss Granger. I assume you will share with us why it was necessary to bring me to Hogwarts and compromise my son's education."
Hermione barely managed not to roll her eyes. Narcissa's precious son skived off class multiple times a week, usually to fly on his broom or sneak down to the kitchens. Missing one practically remedial ancient runes class would make little difference. "Thank you for coming, Lady Malfoy," she said. "I hope the journey was not too uncomfortable in this weather."
"A little Slytherin girl, a Miss Durant, met me at the gate,"
Narcissa said.
"I found her very intriguing." "Leela, she is rather," Draco said.
"She holds you high in regard, of course, Draco," Narcissa went on. Harry gave Hermione a significant look, and she nodded. "Time to get to business." "Lady Malfoy," she said, "Horace arrived at the Slytherin dungeons this morning to ask Theo not for writing the Die Mudblood messages." Harry and Draco winced, but if she was hoping for a response from Lady Malfoy, she was disappointed. To which merrily raised an eyebrow.
"I find it hard to believe young Theodore would do anything of that sort."
"I did as well," Hermione said, but it looked very bad for him. You see, Lady Malfoy, Draco and I have brewed an experimental potion that can identify a witch or wizard's blood, and we now know that your husband's blood was used to create those messages. Narcissa looked at her son.
It's true, Mother,
Draco said.
Hermione and I have been working on it for nearly 2 months. It's a complex potion, but it works, and the blood used was definitely father's.
But your father is confined, Narcissa said. Hermione almost rolled her eyes again. Those Malfoys. Lucius was merely confined in a place of residence that inexplicably didn't allow ours. Exactly, Hermione said. Somehow his blood was procured and transported here, and used in the spell that resulted in the Die Mudblood messages.
Hermione,
Harry said, exacerbated. Do you have to? Fear of saying a thing only increases fear of the thing.
You just like to shock people, and I must say I'm surprised.
Perhaps, Narcissa said in carrying tones. Mr. Potter and Miss Granger could continue this discussion another time?
Yes,
Draco chimed in, sounding much like his mother.
I see where you're headed, Hermione, and I must say I don't like it.
Hermione sighed. I know, Draco. I'm sorry. She turned to Narcissa. Lady Malfoy, Theo visited your husband 2 days before he returned to Hogwarts, and the first message appeared the first night he was in the castle. I was trying to charge him with the crime, but Theo proved his innocence on the Veritaserum. Narcissa's mouth twisted slightly. Hermione knew she had taken Veritaserum herself just after the war. Clearly, the experience had marked her. Lady Malfoy, she said quietly, why don't you tell Draco why you cast a spell?
You seem very sure of yourself, Miss Granger,
Narcissa said. Draco's eyes widened.
This is not denial, Mother. Do you honestly believe I would cast a curse on the castle?
Narcissa asked him. But it wasn't a curse, was it, Lady Malfoy? Hermione asked. Bluebell, our defense against the dark arts teacher, was right from the beginning. Hate, but also love. It was a protection spell, wasn't it? To protect Draco? Draco leaped to his feet, his chair falling with a clatter that echoed through the hall.
Mother! He cried. You didn't!
Narcissa was silent. It was Harry who answered Draco.
Of course she did,
Harry said, his face grim, looking every inch the Auror.
Malfoy, your mother walked into a battle and lied to Voldemort to find you. She forced Snape to take an unbreakable vow for your protection. So yes, she is supremely capable of casting a spell onto the very walls of this castle to protect you from...
He looked at Hermione.
What was the phrase?
Mudblood assassins, Hermione said. Draco ran his hand over his face, obviously trying to calm himself, then looked at Narcissa.
Tell me you didn't, Mother,
he pleaded.
Tell me you didn't cook up some scheme with Father to threaten Muggle-borns. Sit down, darling,
his mother said coolly.
I won't tolerate rude behavior.
Draco barked a laugh.
Our family has served evil incarnate, allowed murder, torture, and other vile and soulless acts in our home, and now has apparently terrorized and endangered innocent students. And you object to an overturned chair. Any possible hope of redeeming myself and the Malfoy name has been utterly...
That's not true, Hermione said. You can still...
I'm sorry, Hermione,
Draco said, turning to her.
Sorry for all of this. We were living in a dream world that this could possibly work for us.
Draco, Hermione choked.
Congratulations, Mother,
he said, turning to her, and his voice was so cold and bitter that it was like Lucius stood before them, except Draco's lower lip trembled in a way she didn't think Lucius ever did.
Congratulations,
he repeated.
You and Father have taken away the only true and good thing in this fucked up life of mine.
Turned back to Hermione.
Is there a reason why McGonagall and Shacklebolt aren't here?
I thought we could talk it through ourselves before involving them, she admitted.
Potter, get them, Draco ordered. McGonagall teaches ancient runes at this time." "Are you sure?" Harry asked. "We can't keep quiet if—" "I have no intention of keeping it quiet,"
Draco said. Harry nodded and left the hall.
"Draco, darling." "No, Mother," he said. "You're trained to obey, right, like a good pure-blood wife? You've been obeying Lucius' orders, and now you're going to obey mine. You had the opportunity to use your own judgment, and you rejected it."
"Draco," Hermione said, "they'll arrest her publicly. This violates the terms of her probations. They'll charge her with casting illegal and harmful spells on the castle, with endangering students, with breaking that new statute against targeting Muggleborns, with—"
"Miss Granger,"
Narcissa said,
"you can hardly pretend to be concerned about my welfare."
"I'm not," Hermione said honestly. "It's Draco I'm worried about." Draco picked up his chair and sat down.
"Please take your seat, Mother,"
he said in a tired voice. Narcissa did so, her hands clasped. Her face was anguished now as she looked at her son. Hermione sat quietly, following Draco's lead as well. This was his family at stake.
"All right, Mother,"
he said more calmly.
"How did this happen?"
Narcissa took a jagged breath.
"Over the summer, Daily Prophet read so many stories about the rising hatred for purebloods, and for our family especially. I don't deny we have earned much of it, but I couldn't allow you to return to school unprotected."
She clasped her hands and extended them towards her son.
"Draco," she said, "I didn't know about the messages. When your father told me of the spell, he never mentioned his hatred. It runs very deep."
She dropped her hands and looked down.
"Very deep in his blood, through generations."
Hermione thought of the Malfoy family motto, Sanctimonia vincit semper. Purity will always conquer. Draco shook his head.
"How could you have so little faith in me? I'm not a child anymore."
He sighed.
"The only real danger to me was the danger you caused. Who did you think was the prime suspect when that first message appeared in Gryffindor Tower? I had to take Veritas there myself to clear my name, and who knows how that would have ended if it hadn't been for Hermione. She's defended me in the teeth of the school, her friends, and the ministry." "You must have been in danger, Draco,"
Narcissa protested.
"The messages wouldn't have appeared if Muggleborns hadn't threatened you."
Draco looked at her with contempt.
"Yes, it is quite an efficient protection spell. You and Lucius ought to be congratulated. All it took was a crying fourth year of raising his wand and few fits of temper from Hermione, and suddenly we have students slamming into walls. You could have heard her. A stone block for her from the ceiling on Sunday. It could have killed her."
He glared at Narcissa.
"I will never forgive you for that. Ever."
The door slammed open again, and Harry, Kingsley, and McGonagall entered at a run. Kingsley immediately locked and warded the door and advanced on Narcissa, who sat rigid in her chair.
"Is this true, Lady Malfoy? Do you admit to casting the spell that produced those messages?"
Narcissa glanced at Draco's implacable face and nodded.
"Yes," she said.
"We understand from Mr. Potter that you cast a protection spell designed to shield Mr. Malfoy from any attacks from Muggleborns,"
McGonagall said.
"Yes," Narcissa said. "When did you cast the spell?"
Kingsley said.
"On, I believe it was Saturday, September 8th. My first visit to Hogwarts this term."
Narcissa's back was straight and her voice was cool.
"After sending Draco away, I slipped into the Great Hall and warded the door. It's a very short spell. I used Lucius' blood. I didn't understand all the words. Lucius assured me it was not a lethal spell, would only affect any Muggleborn who attacked Draco. Actually, it would protect anyone of Lucius' blood."
"How does it work?" Hermione asked. Narcissa gave her a thin smile.
"I'm sure you already know, Miss Granger." "We'd rather hear it from you, Lady Malfoy," Kingsley said. "The spell soaks into the castle wall," Narcissa went on. "My understanding is that the castle repels curses, but not protective magics. Whenever the castle sensed an attack on Draco, it responded.
There are 1,000 years of magic in these walls,
McGonagall said.
The castle is very nearly sentient. There are already spells in place to protect students, and apparently this was considered simply another one.
Potter says you claim you didn't know about the messages, Kingsley said. I didn't, Narcissa said. I assumed perhaps some blood dripping in the walls. I'm willing to take Veritaserum. Kingsley nodded. It may come to that, although I believe you. His voice was cold, but not unkind. You will need to come with us to the ministry. We can't leave the spell on the walls, Hermione said, standing. We need Lady Malfoy to remove it. I can't, Narcissa said. Not without Lucius' blood. Hermione pulled the vial of blood out of her skirt pocket. She'd been carrying it around since Harry gave it to her, wrapped in cautioning spells. Narcissa looked at the vial in her hand, then up at Hermione. You chose this hall on purpose, Miss Granger, she said. How did you know? I saw you outside the Great Hall with Draco, and it seemed logical, Hermione answered. A spell this strong, extending through the whole castle. It must have been cast here, in the heart of the castle. She pointed at a broad expanse of wall behind the headmistress' throne. Probably there. Narcissa looked at the wall and hesitated. Remove the spell, Mother, Draco said. It is unlikely I will have children, but if I do and they attend Hogwarts, I won't have the castle dropping stones on any Muggleborn who moves towards them in a possibly threatening manner. Narcissa looked horrified. Draco, you wouldn't... Some names are perhaps meant to die out, Mother, Draco said, and his face looked so tight and bleak that Hermione almost burst into tears. Draco, don't talk that way. You must carry on. Never say must to me, Draco said. Never again. Hermione didn't know how Narcissa did it, but she managed to stiffen her spine and walk over to the wall behind McGonagall's chair, her ears clicking on the stone floor. They watched her pour the blood on the walls, murmuring under her breath, and the floating candles above flickered, went out for an instant, plunging them in grey shadow, with only the weak light outside. Then the candles blazed into flames once more, and the wall glowed faintly red, then faded. Draco turned to Hermione and nodded. Hermione pulled out her wand, casting a medium-grade stunning spell at Draco. The hex hit him in the arm, and the spell was strong enough to spin him around to make him stagger backwards and almost fall. Harry, Kingsley, and McGonagall all had their wands out, prepared to interfere if the castle responded, but Hermione didn't move and the walls remained solid. The spell is gone, Hermione said. Very well, Kingsley said, walking up to Narcissa, who still stood by the chair, her wand at her side. Lady Malfoy, you're under arrest for violating the terms of your probation by casting illegal and harmful spells on the castle. Don't forget endangering students, Draco said, and breaking the Ministry's statute against targeting Muggleborns, and... That's enough to go on with, Harry said. It's not nearly enough, he said, looking very much like the Malfoy she remembered from 6th year. You can also charge you with assault against Dennis Creevey and Hermione Granger, and colluding with a convicted Death Eater to cause harm. And don't forget to charge Lucius as well. Draco, Narcissa moaned. Don't. They'll execute him. They'll kill your father. He deserves it, Draco said. Hermione opened her mouth. And don't you dare start quoting at me, Hermione. Lucius Malfoy deserves execution, and we all know it. And if the Ministry had had the stones to do it after the battle, as they did with Ignatius Nott, we all would have been spared much grief. Charge them both, Shacklebolt. I'll testify. Draco raised his wand, easily breaking Kingsley's wards, and left the hall without a look at anyone, least of all his mother. The doors closed behind him, with a thunderous boom, echoing through the nearly empty space, and Hermione wondered if Draco had slammed the doors on everyone, including herself. To be continued. Next up, Hermione makes a promise. Harry meets the squeaky mice.
Thank you for listening to this chapter of the Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.